Well, welcome to Marriage Infusion Part 3. We're Chris and Jenna Hippie, and we're just here to share. We really want to infuse life into your marriages in this season where a lot of us are in quarantine. So we're so glad you're joining us. We want to know, we're going to start off tonight with answering some questions from last week. And so if you have questions throughout any of our teaching tonight, please go to the Slido link and you'll be anonymous. So no one will be able to know who the question is from. And then we'll address that on week 4.
Yeah, and if this is the first infusion that you have come and engaged with us on, encourage you to listen to or watch the previous 2, because we're building on something here. We're talking about being strategic in our marriages to infuse life and how to be a blessing to our spouse, how to make deposits in their love banks. A couple weeks ago, we talked about the third most important need for a husband and a wife. Last week, we talked about the second most important need for our husband or our wife. Being recreational companionship for the men is the second greatest need, and conversation is the second greatest need for the wife. And so from that, we've had some questions come in that, like Jenna was saying, we're going to take on the front end here tonight, and then we're going to talk tonight about the number one most important need for the wife and the number one most important need for the husband. Okay, so here's the question that came in. What does it look like for a husband to lead his family spiritually? This is a great question, and it's really important to answer. This right here, more is caught than taught, meaning we will replicate who we are. What we're committed to will have more of an impact on our kids and our wives than what our mouth really says. So for me, it's important to recognize that the headwaters of this answer really goes back to my personal relationship with Jesus. John chapter 15 says, "Abide in the vine, and you're going to produce abundant fruit." It's one thing to talk about following Jesus, and it's another thing to stay connected with him. So the questions that I would pose for all of us, including myself, that I ask is, what role does the Word of God play in my life? Am I reading the Word regularly? Am I memorizing Scripture? Am I listening to the Word of God? Do I allow the Word to wash over my heart more so than any other source that I dig into? Also, I'd ask, what role does prayer play? It's the quiet prayer. It's the dynamic prayer. It's the conversational prayer. It's these stories that we see of people that of great ones, that when they're kids, there's stories that they'll go in and see their mom or their dad on their face in prayer for people. There's more that we learn as children at that point than any other time. And so the spiritual leadership is caught. We're replicating from our lives. And so if there is an idol in your life, that idol is actually impacting your kids and your family and your marriage. And we want to be so connected in with Jesus that your kids come to you one day when they're older and they say, "Dad, you set a great example for me. Dad, you did a great job. I saw you love Jesus with your whole heart." And from that place, the fruit of the Spirit is produced. Love, joy, peace, patience. These are the things that we don't try to do. They're things that come out of us because we are leading. The people that suffer the most when we are disconnected from the vine is our wives and our kids and those close to us. And so spiritual leadership is very important for us to engage with and realize, if you're going to do something well, if we're going to do something well, be connected with Jesus. And you may not have all the answers to some really hard questions of life, but if you stay connected to Jesus, the biblical promise is good fruit and lots of fruit and abundant fruit.
I think a few other things I thought about when it comes to the spiritual leadership of a husband in a home would be, first of all, as wives, we're responsible for our own walk with the Lord, right? When I'm going to stand with Jesus face to face, and I can't defer onto Chris, right? I'm personally responsible to be connected to the vine. But a few other thoughts that I would have would be, husbands are like work as gatekeepers. Like, what are we letting into the gates of our home, the gates of our minds and our hearts?
Yeah.
Are they pure, peace-loving? Are they good? Are they of God? Would I feel comfortable behaving this way at church? Would I talk this way at church? Would I consume this product at church? Would I watch this movie at church with my friends at church? Like, so just thinking about what are we letting in, and really the husband's the gatekeeper of the home. Obviously, I'm not going to try to do something wrong, and it's his responsibility to keep me. I have self-governance, but I'm just saying husbands are to be gatekeepers and spiritually lead their families. The other thing I would say is the significance and importance of, that's why I believe it's in Ecclesiastes, it talks about the three-corded strand, right? There's seasons when Chris is weak and I'm strong, or I'm weak and he's strong. And so one thing I think is essential, yes, I said the word essential, for couples is to not give up in fellowship with other believers. Hebrews 10:24-25 says, do not give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but consider how you may spur one another on to love and good deeds, right?
Yeah,
I didn't Genelonians that one, I don't think. Anyway,
not this time.
Sometimes I take two different verses and mix them up, and they're pretty good, but they're not necessarily the Bible. But I know this is hard in this season. We are not meeting together. It's right now been prohibited, but it's still making that effort. Like, hey, a husband, if your wife is weak and tired right now, it's engaging your family in these live services that are happening, listening to the word, worship. But when we can meet together, it's taking that responsibility, even when she feels worn down. Hey, we're going to go to church, right? It's so important, you guys. We've seen lack of fellowship. It just starts with, somebody sick for a couple weeks, months, and then all of a sudden couples and families get out of the habit of coming to church. And what's the scripture say about that? When we get isolated, the enemy attacks. So I cannot tell you, I really don't care I want you to go to a Bible-believing church, but I don't care what church you go to. You need to be active in a fellowship for the sake of your marriage. And husbands, I do believe, obviously your wife has her own personal convictions and she has to walk with the Lord in a way that honors him. But husbands, it's important. It's vital. This is necessary, essential to the health, happiness, and wholeness of your marriage. Final thing, I'm so sorry, I'm kind of going off on this, but I also think sometimes, we've learned that it takes 10 years to kind of learn how to be a husband and learn how to be a wife, and what do those roles look like, and functioning in character. It's a long road. It's like a marathon. It's not a 100-yard dash, right? We don't just get it out of the gates. And so it's easy. I've seen this happen so many times for wives to have these insane expectations on their husband of what leadership would look like. I need to not be putting on Chris the pressure for him to be Jesus, right? If anything, I need to be looking at this speck in my eye. Where am I falling short of being like the Lord? But sometimes I listen, and whether it's husbands to wives or wives to husbands, it's so easy to have this insane expectation on their spouse. And it's like, we just need to look at ourselves. How am I walking with God?
Yeah.
Right? And not put that all on our husband. Okay, so question number 2 was, what are some ideas of recreational companionship during quarantine? And I think this question specifically came from a family with young children. Man, we feel you.
Yeah, it's hard. Right?
Our kids are older now, but we remember those days that are just they're so fun and crazy, and yet they're loud and you're tired. But just as we kind of brainstormed, obviously when your kids are young, you can't just leave them at home alone. And right now in quarantine, you can't even leave them with your in-laws or your parents right now. So it's going to be kind of getting out and maybe going on bike rides together, walks together, discovering new areas of the city together, maybe going fishing, maybe planting a garden, or going for drives. Maybe a strategic drive during nap time so the kids kind of fall asleep and you can drive and talk. And this is also a time, like maybe when they go down to sleep, as you're talking about what are a couple things that you like to do, like when you're talking to your husband about this recreational companionship, and start learning about those things. Like if he's a big camper, well, let's watch a couple YouTubes, or let's talk about like what would we need to pack, where would we want to go, and kind of starting to plan for when you're going to do that. So even if you can't engage in recreational companionship right now, you can start talking about it. You can start planning and setting a date and coming up with a plan of how you can execute that. So, and also don't take for granted, like young kids take naps, most of them. I know some of you probably have kiddos that don't, But when you do, spend that time together. Go out and sit in your backyard in the sun, have a glass of iced tea, and talk about what your husband would like to do, where he wants to take you, places he's been, and just have some conversation now. Ask some questions and kind of start dreaming and planning for the future.
Yeah, and so those are a couple of the questions we got last week. And so as we transition into the topic for tonight, it's important to remember that we're talking about how we can bless our spouse the most strategically. This is not about me. This is not about what can I do to get something in return.
Yes.
This is about me giving my life away to my spouse with no expectation in return. That is the most pure form of love. It's the self-giving love. Tonight we're going to be talking about the number one most important need to make deposits into our spouse's heart and life. So what that means is that if you're going to do something, if there's something you're going to do for your spouse, start here. This is a great place to consider giving a lot of attention. And so we're going to start with the number one need for wives. Now, we've said this, is that this may not be 100% of people, but we've done a lot of different research, and we would say that this is most women. So a wife's number one most important need is affection. And affection it's an environment. Affection is a heart condition. Where there is affection, there is safety. Where there's affection, it's like when you see a flower come out like a rhododendron bud, and when in an environment of warmth and affection, it blossoms into the fullness. But where affection is not, it'll stay hard and potentially bound up in bud form. And so we're defining affection as this. Affection is what we would call that gifts and hugs and expression of love in words, kisses, courtesies, creating an environment that clearly and repeatedly expresses love. So this is, if you were to consider that affection is the environment. Affection is not when I want something. Affection shows up when a man's heart is soft, when a man's heart is right. It's a safe place. It's an environment of love and appreciation. It shows up in words. I love you. I care about you. I love you very much. Probably your wife needs to hear I love you more than you might. She needs to know that we're good. She needs to know that we're on good terms. This is the place, and it also shows up in physical affection. Not when you want something in return. This is not like a bait and switch. This is, in looking at affection, one of the things that has really baffled me as a man over the years is how much a hug communicates to a wife. If there's a form of affection that your wife needs from you regularly, it's a hug. Hugs communicate a whole lot more than you and I may ever understand, but it's hugs and it's kisses, and it's not just at one time during the day, but it's when you go to work in the morning, I love you, a kiss out the door. It's when you come home, it's in the evening time, and it's repeated. And this is what I have found in doing marriage counseling over the years is men can forget. Men can almost need to wire themselves. I know, it's incredible. And your wife may come to you, like Jenna's to me, and said, do you love me? Are we good? And there's communication in there that she's just needing more affection from me. Now men, here's what I would say is that if you don't realize this is your wife's number one need, you'll perceive that as controlling. You'll perceive that as manipulative.
Or insecure, maybe. Or if this
insecure.
is your insecurity, when it's like, well, maybe if the stream's been a little dry.
Yeah, and there's an ongoing need for our wives to repeatedly be shown affection through word and action on a regular basis. Now, we're going to explore how this interfaces with a man's number one need. But let me just rest assured to you men that if you want your number one need met, this is the environment that you get to create. It's an environment of great affection and love shown. I've shared this before, and we have 4 kids. We have the 3 boys and the girl. Our Zoe, our daughter, is the youngest, and all of our boys range from 16 to 13.
Yep.
Thank you. And Zoe is age 11.
Yep.
Okay, we're batting 1,000. Praise the Lord. And
do you want me to ask their birthdays?
Nope. I'd be able to get that in the name of Jesus. But this is what I would say that my daughter will give me about 10 to 12 hugs a day. Just today, before coming to record this, she was struggling with something that she heard, and she goes, "Dad, I just need a hug." And I looked at her, I go, I'm always good for one. And I held her, I go, "What's this hug mean?" She said, "Well, I just heard this and this thing, and I'm a little bit scared." And there was a lot more going on than my words would ever communicate. She knows that she's safe in Dad's hands, in Dad's arms. She knows that she's protected. Our wives need affection from us. Yeah.
2 words that I think are great descriptions, or what maybe I'm trying to think of the grammar word. I can't think of it, but it's like thoughtfulness and tenderness. When I think of affection, and when I think Chris is like, I can see it in his eyes. There's a thoughtfulness and a tenderness. He's not, or your husband isn't consumed by the worries of life, his job, other things. Like the wife feels like a priority when there's affection. So that would be.
Yeah, I think some of the things that affection communicates to our wives is, number one, I care about you. I care about you, and you are outside of Jesus my number one. Also, you're important to me, and I'll do anything for you. Your happiness is important to me. Number 3, it communicates I'm concerned about the problems you face. I'm carrying your burdens. I'm here to listen to you. Affection says I'm your best friend, and I want to be a trusted, reliable source for you to come to. Now, when it comes to a man's number one need, you can't have that without affection. They go hand in hand. These 2 tonight go hand in hand, and we'll get to man's number one need in just a minute. But you need both, and it's important to acknowledge this: is that when you consider the undealt with pain of the past, when you consider a man that is trying really hard to love his wife, but has not dealt with the pain in his own life, his own rejection, his own betrayal, if he has minimized that pain, or if he's just acting like it didn't happen or excusing it, it will affect his ability to show affection to his wife. Meaning this, is that a man's refusal to let the Lord come and heal him will set a low ceiling on him, and he will never be able to show his wife the true God-given Jesus affection without allowing the Lord to heal his heart. Because it's out of the overflow of the heart that the mouth speaks. And so husbands, this is what I'm encouraging you. Some husbands choose not to allow Jesus to heal them, and their marriage suffers, and some of them fall apart. And it's so grieving to me because it comes through a decision. The Lord's going to heal those that desire to be healed. He's not going to force himself on you. But if your wife is looking at you tonight and from an honest position is saying, I'm really, my love tank of affection is really low. One of the places to look, man, is there anything in my life that's hindering me? Do you have secret addictions? Are you addicted to things that you need breakthrough in the company of other men? Are there undealt with things in your life? I'm telling you, it'll put a ceiling on you, and no matter how hard you try, you will seemingly fail because it won't be an overflow. You need to let Jesus come in. You need to do work to break those addictions, and it will overflow into your marriage, and there will be life that will come. I'll just tell you, I know many of you from different churches, but for men in our church that have been struggling with secret addictions and that got serious about it in the company of other brothers, Their wives are rising up and calling him blessed because the overflow, because of the healing. So when you consider affection, any man can learn to become affectionate. This is what's important. Some of us grew up in homes that we weren't modeled affection. We didn't grow up with a dad, a godly man in the house. We didn't grow up with a good example, or we were raised by a single mom, and you may have bought into the lie, you know what, I can't be affectionate. It's just impossible for me. I want to encourage you to disregard that, to disagree with that. The Lord Jesus can come and do a good work. And if you become a student of your wife, if you realize that, yes, you can become affectionate no matter what your background is, no matter what your pedigree is, the Lord can do a work in your life if you choose to partner with him in that. Now, here's some habits to create. Okay, here's some thoughts to that practically, because we as men are practical. We like practical things. Okay, I'm on board with the affection. I'm on board to show my wife, number one, affection. So what do I do? Here's a couple. Number one, talk with your wife, telling her how much you care about her. Just open your mouth. Just start saying, I love you. I care for you. When you look at her and you're struck by her beauty, tell her. When you find her, her treating your kids with such a wonder, tell her. Yeah. Practice saying the things that you're thankful for about her. Number two, hugs and kisses. Not just when you want something. Hugs and kisses when you don't want something. Hugs and kisses that communicate to her. When she's sick and she can't do anything for you, love her well. I love watching some of these older couples and knowing some of these older couples historically that they just love each other so well. One of them is struggling with a sickness or an ailment, and they just love each other so well. Third thing I'd say is calling and texting during the day is pretty incredible to me. How much that has historically meant. We're all just called, Jenna, for no agenda. Now, did you hear me, men? I said no agenda, meaning you're calling for no purpose. When we call each other, for example...
Or he's calling to listen to me.
It's a concept. When we call each other, sometimes we'll say to each other, men, like, what's up? What are we communicating? We're saying,
what do you need?
What do you want? What are we going to solve? What are we going to fix? If you've done that to your wife, you realize that doesn't go so well. Shoot a text to her and just say, I love you. Shoot a text to her and say, I'm thinking about you. Call her for no apparent reason other than I'm just calling to say hi. Those are all deposits into our wife's love bank because it communicates to her, I'm thinking about you. I love you. You're on my heart and my mind. And that causes this overwhelming sense of response.
Thoughtfulness. That's thoughtfulness.
That is thoughtfulness. Another one, a fifth one, would be this. Do the dishes. It is amazing. So for many couples, you have certain things that are your focal area. I did not have a love language of dish doing. I had a love language of clean floors. And so I would clean the floors. And I'm thinking I'm pretty happy with myself. Wow, those are clean. And Jenna would come in, and I'm expecting some type of like, oh, greetings, mighty man of God. Thank you.
Or just thanks, babe.
Yeah, or something. But I would get nothing because the dishes were overflowing the sink, and I had to realize I was doing the floors more for me than I was her, and I needed to do a little research. And I remember, I think we're probably about 10 years married, somewhere around there. Mm-hmm. You mean dishes to you, an empty sink, a clean sink, a washed out sink, even a dried sink, I don't think I've ever done that, that means a lot to you. Mm-hmm. So because that's your priority, I'm going to make that my priority. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to start intentionally doing dishes. I'm going to start intentionally loving you in that way. And your wife, dishes may not be the thing, but husbands, here's the thing. Strategically minded men will say, I want to find what your love language is,
Yes.
and I want to meet you where you're at. That's another way to do it. Here's what I'd also say. Number 6, I think this is cards and flowers, cards and flowers, cards and flowers. That's all 6, 7, and 8. And it's not just that we're giving them, it's actually the quality of them. Can I have a moment, please? Just grabbing a card, I didn't realize how important the wording was on cards until we got married.
This might not be for every woman, just caveat that.
But I realized in order to show her ultimate affection, I needed to actually spend time thinking and writing down and considering. And even as we're viewing this, yesterday, Mother's Day, this, I'm sure you did a great job. And if you didn't, make up for it in the name of Jesus, okay? So it's the quality of card. Figure that out. What is she like? But it's also the quality of flowers. Your wife may love carnations. My wife does not. And I realized that just because they're bulk and there's a lot there can't count for the quality.
Bargain flowers that's not where you want to practice bargaining.
Roadside stands are iffy. If they're spray painted, pass on them. Just some counsel. But cards and flowers, and for no apparent reason. The next one is this. You got to remember her birthday. You got to remember Christmas. You got to remember Mother's Day. You got to remember Valentine's Day. And you have to remember your anniversary. I'm pretty sure that's most of all of them. So those are bare minimum cards and flowers moments. But then also outside of that, just show up one day. And husbands, for me, since that was not a natural way to go, I would actually put it in my calendar and it would set on repeat. And it would alert me. It would say, hey, you need to go get flowers. Because I needed to be reminded, because I'm prone to getting distracted and focused on other things. But I want my wife to know she's the priority. So I needed help in that. Okay, think sentimental, not practical. That's the overarching ways. Think sentimental, not practical. So that might mean sit down, watch a romantic comedy that's clean, and you might want to steal some of the tricks. Think sentimental, not practical.
Before we get into it, Chris is going to go another place that's really great. I just think this would be a good time, if you can pause this video or after when you're done, for you to talk, for the wife to kind of identify, of that list, what would be the top 2 or 3 that mean the most to you? Because Chris alluded to the 5 love languages. So, it's hard to come out of the gun like doing all 8 of these. Most likely we'll drop the ball. But if you know those top 1 or 2 that would mean the most to her and you really tried to excel at those, I think that would be ideal. Because, the love language, there's our gifts, quality time, words of encouragement, physical touch. I'm missing one.
Acts of service.
Acts of service. So kind of find out which one of those 1 or 2 of those are your wife's top needs. And then of these things listed, what would bless you the most? Like mine was dishes. For another wife, it might be clean floors, or it might be something totally different, a clean car. Who knows? But I just think make sure you take some time to talk about which 2 of these would communicate affection to you, that you're my priority. I love you.
So here's what to avoid, men. This is what to avoid is affection motivated with selfish intent. It's a motivation. I'm going to serve you with expectation of getting something from you. Any of that is self-serving, and unfortunately, it diminishes the quality of the affection shown. Our wives, as you know, are extremely perceptive, intuitive, discerning, and they have like a tractor beam reality to be able to assess motivation many times. I want to encourage you what to avoid. Avoid acts of affection that are selfish in nature, okay? This is what Philippians chapter 2, verses 3-4 says. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others, meaning your wife, more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to your own interests, but also the interests of others. What would make the maximum benefit, affection for your wife, the maximum deposit in her love bank? Because affection is a way of life. It really covers and protects your marriage from so much. And so husbands, I just exhort you, may we continually, as we realize this is her number one need, give yourself to it. Not just in this COVID-19 season, but even when even more is coming, and when you're 50 years married, or maybe you're pre-married, or maybe you're just freshly married, or maybe you're even dating, watching this, I'm going to encourage you, husbands, learn how to show godly affection toward your wife. So we go to the wives.
Okay, here we go. So a husband's number one need, I don't know that this is a mystery because we haven't mentioned it on 3 and 2.
It's conversation. Number one most important, no, it's not really conversation.
No, number one is sexual fulfillment. And so what I want to hit on the forefront is that this is how God wired men. This is not gross. This is not perverted. Sure, in the world, there is perversion out there. But this is a husband's number one need. Number one. And when I think about, as wives, as we think about what am I doing for my husband, we can have a long list. But my question is the first thing I think about is that his number one need is sexual fulfillment, which that's what a husband's number one need is. And so here's sexual fulfillment defined. In the bedroom, your husband desires affirmation, creativity, and frequency. Sexual fulfillment is a sexual experience that brings out predictably enjoyable sex response in both of you that is frequent enough for both of you. So one thing that's essential is that there's communication, right? This is an area of intimacy, and this is the safest person that you're with. Husbands and wives, those are the people that know you the most. It may be a very awkward thing to talk about, but it's really important that this is an open place of communication. The healthiest marriages are those that communicate about sex regularly, have sex regularly, and learn more about sex. This is a place of ongoing learning. It doesn't stop.
Yeah, and it's really important to realize that God created us and to have great dynamic sex within marriage. Now, I know all the husbands are like, oh, praise God, we're finally talking about this, or something. I want to tell you that it's really important to have our mind redeemed when it comes to sexual fulfillment. To have it redeemed and have a godly outlook and not some carnal, worldly outlook. There is a great battle over the marriage bed. There's a great battle. The world is absolutely inundating and trying to take over the marriage bed. And we have to fight diligently to gain God's perspective, His design for sexual fulfillment. And so it's important. And it's also important to realize that this sexual fulfillment oftentimes is a barometer or a temperature gauge of the health of our marriage. We have counseled so many couples that they could have really an incredible relationship. They're the best of friends. They're hitting on all of the other needs. But when it comes to a difficult spot, it's this. And it could be they came from a home that this was never talked about. There was never any true godly education. They have never done any really looking into it. And or they've come from brokenness, sexual deviancy, being hurt in a molestation, abusive manner. If there's something that we have come to realize is that this is a battle that you've got to win. This is a battle that really has a major impact on the war of your marriage. There are some battles that you can win or lose. But there's other battles that you have to fight and do diligence and give yourselves to having a fulfilling sexual relationship in your marriage in order to have the rest of the marriage really taken care of and watched over. So we want to recognize that this is not necessarily a common topic to be talking about. I mean, some of you hear this and you might go, ooh, what are we talking about? You're not allowed to say sex in church. And others of you, like I said, are probably like, glory to God, it's about time. But what we want to tell you is we're going to share some thoughts with you. And also we're going to end by giving you 5 resources to dig into. And these 5 resources are what we would call our top 5 resources when it comes to affection and sex in marriage. That we want to encourage you to never stop reading them, to never get to the point where you're like, oh yeah, everything's fine. No, once you give into everything is fine, then you're stopping investing in your marriage. So I just want to tell you that we're uncorking a huge topic here. This is a big topic. But we also want you to know that we're going to give you some resources that we want you to be digging into.
Yeah, and it's really something that's very holy and beautiful, and it's a gift from God. And it's so important to get on the same page. And so when I think about it, like healthy marriages, if you think about it this way, affection is the environment and sex is the event. In a healthy marriage, a couple agrees on the significance and importance. I want you to think about this, wives. When your husband married you, he said, I am trusting you to meet my number one need as a man. And that I will give you my entire heart. And you will be the only woman that has this place. So when we think of some of these marriages that are broken, how many marriages have been broken because the wife didn't take care of that need for her husband? I know there's a lot to every story, but I'm just saying when we put those rings and we make those vows, your husband has entrusted you to meet this need for the rest of his life. And he said, I've given this only to you. That's holy. That's taking, we all take risks, but can you see the risk in that? And so it's essential that we as wives understand the significance and the importance of this. I know through reading a couple different books, I was clueless. And I think most wives are pretty clueless to how much of a need and how significant this is to the health of a marriage. I want us all to think about, as I believe every woman who enters marriage wants to be a great wife. And we spend a lot of energy maybe taking care of the house or bringing in income or raising kids and preparing meals. And I know those responsibilities are different for each couple, but I would bet that most men would be like, I don't mind if our house is a little messier. I don't mind if you get takeout tonight. They would rather have this need met than all of these other needs, up to Pinterest code. I think a lot of times what we're doing to think I'm a successful wife or mother is actually more about us than it is about our husbands. And if we would spend a little bit less energy prioritizing those areas, or even our friends, going to bed and actually having energy, not going to bed totally exhausted or spent. And you've given everything for the day, going, I need to save some energy. We as wives need to save some energy for that time. And also on that topic is going to bed at the same time.
It's important.
Whether the husband's staying up watching movies or whatever, I don't even know, or the wife is on social media or still working or still cleaning, having nights where it's we're going to go to bed at the same time so somebody's not too exhausted. This is so important for the health of your marriage, the long-term just health trajectory, for us to understand and get on the same page on this.
Yeah, so I'd even encourage you to just take a moment, take a deep breath, okay, look at each other, and just say maybe, man, wow, this is intense, or wow, this is good. If you're healthy, in a healthy spot, maybe you can kiss and say, I love you, real quick. Husbands, I want to remind you that you may be celebrating that we're talking about this, but remember, your affection, your love deposits, without the motivation of anything in return, not self-serving, is really important to creating the environment. So you don't want to be the husband that only shows up to marriage trainings when it's about sex. That's not, that shows your selfish, self-serving desire. And I want to tell you that that's not what health looks like, okay? Yeah. And we also want to acknowledge when it comes to sexual intimacy, sometimes the husband is not the one that has the majority of the sexual drive. Sometimes it's the wife. And there's often, there's testosterone issues involved. And there's lots of dynamics that show up. The health that we are, our emotional health and our spiritual health really shows up in the marital bed. We've walked with couples, plenty of couples, that they're super healthy, but when they get married, all of a sudden sexual intimacy is really difficult because of some real painful things that have experienced in the past that need to be washed and cleansed by the blood of Jesus Christ. And so I want to tell you again, this is a battle that you want to fight for, that you want to be patient and enduring and win this battle for sure.
And we truly believe it's something that's supposed to be mutually beneficial and mutually enjoyable. So that's really important, right? So that's where the communication comes in, because if it's all selfish on one person's behalf and it's not enjoyable for your spouse, that in terms of frequency, do you know what I mean? You don't want the other person dreading intimacy. You want both people to enjoy what's happening, and that takes communication and selflessness and patience. So
and really, men, it's important that if you have a pornography addiction in your life, I'm just going to get really honest right here. Not that we haven't been honest to this point. You need breakthrough. This is not something you can do on your own. You need men, and if you need help, we're here as a community to help you. We can connect you in. All you have to do is send an email. You can even type the word help in the text in the chat there, or you can send an email directly to me, chris@citycentral.org. If you're here in Tacoma locally, I will connect you with brothers that'll minister to you and bring you into places of victory. Because here's the last thing you want to do. The last thing you want to do is objectify your wife and use your wife for your own selfish gain. If your view of sex is more dictated by the things of this world, here is your okay corral. Here is your battle that you must win. You got to give yourself to not a week of breakthrough or a month of breakthrough, but months and months and months of breakthrough. And it's only going to happen in community, in renewal of the mind, going through a systematic approach of having your life redeemed, because you're going to bring your past into the marital bed, and you don't want your wife to feel like she's a means to an end for your selfish gain, okay? And I'd also say this, so there's that. Then I'd also say this, it's also important to acknowledge that oftentimes men are like microwaves and women are like an oven. And men can warm up a little bit faster like a microwave than an oven can. When we're talking about creating a mutually sexually fulfilling marriage, you have to have your others, your spouses, her best in mind, right? And that she would be loved and blessed. And a great policy to adopt is if either of one of you want to have sex, that you do. And so it's again lining up with what Paul is saying. Your body is not your own, and so it's important that we develop these patterns because wives, it is important for your husbands, and we have counseled couples that wives will just say, "I had no idea," because it sounds so counterintuitive, and just because it's that important to him does not mean it's godless and horrible and nasty. No, it very much so could be coming from a pure motivation that is honoring and loving and Christ-centered and actually in God's design for you. And so this is a place to bring redemption. Now, as we're talking about some of these things, some of you might be saying, wow, there's stuff coming up in our marriage. This is one of those things that need redemption. Of all the places that restoration shows up, or a lack thereof, it shows up in our marital bed. And this is why we need to get restored. This is why we need to come through freedom classes, freedom immersions. This is why we need to reach out for prayer regularly, that those places in our hearts would be redeemed and made whole.
I think I would say just a few things in closing. Don't settle. Realize this is part of your journey. Just as you're learning how to emotionally connect and walk together through life, this is a journey. And when both people are given to it and learning and growing and communicating, things get better. So don't settle. That would be awful. The other thing I would say is that frequency matters. And now that frequency, like Chris said, sex drives vary, but having a really honest conversation about how many times a week should this happen? And some wives their jaws may drop to the floor, but it really is important, right? So again, I used this example last week, this is a need. And so it's we're just too busy for that. We have kids and all these things. Well, would you be okay if he just stopped talking to you because you're too busy for that? No.
Yeah.
So we're not too busy. Like, in fact, we need to maybe stop some other things and put some boundaries on some other things to make time for this need to be met. And I think it would be, like when that frequency conversation comes about, it's an honest conversation. Okay, what needs to change in our life? And maybe the husband's like, what can I help you with that would enable you and free you up to have more energy, to have this be more of a focus? So there's honest conversation there, right? But just wives, when you hear that, going, yeah, I want to minister to my husband in this way. As Chris and I were talking about men and husbands and women's and how they're wired differently. So we're just wired differently. We really have to accept that. As women, if we're offended by this, we have to let it go. You're not a man. Mm-hmm. I know.
And you praise the Lord for that. Trust me.
He's wired differently. And all of that is of God. So I don't know you got to give that over to God, right? But I would just say, like, this is a way that wives can minister to their husbands. There can be stress at work. There can be stress in the home. There can be stress relationally. But if this area is healthy, there's something in him that's at peace and secure. If you have all those factors, and this is a hit and miss topic, like it's a once a month, once a week deal or whatever, it's like his inner man is disoriented. Right? Yeah. It's like he has a hard time handling all those other stresses. So this is a way that we can minister to the Lord by ministering to our husbands and making this a priority. It strengthens him. There's physical things at play. There's chemical things at play. There's spiritual things at play. This is how we can his number one need. This is how we can best minister to our husbands. It's not the thank you notes. It's not the beautiful meal. No. It's not the words of encouragement. The hugs and kisses might bless us. Sure, it's a blessing, but I'm telling you, this is it, right? And so just because it's different doesn't excuse us. Once revelation, now there's accountability, right? When I got revelation, when wives get revelation, there's accountability. It's time to step. You can't live in ignorance, right? Like, if this is the number one need, then we have a calling as wives to meet that need. Just as we feel like our husbands are called to meet those needs. Again, wives, we can't focus on what they're not doing or they are doing. We have to focus on what I'm to do unto the Lord to love my spouse. This is about making deposits, right? And when we make deposits, you will see overflow, right? So it might take longer than you think, but you will see overflow.
And here's what I would say is that it's important to find a married couple that's a little bit deeper in years married than you are, and that you see and you go, man, I love watching the way they treat each other. And reach out to them and say, hey, can we get a Zoom call? We just want to ask you 6 questions. We want to ask you 3 questions. Mm-hmm. I have yet to find a couple that would say, no, we don't want to. If you come with questions and ask, and you're going to find answers. You're going to find help. You see, we're not just here to teach. We're here to help bring some practical application. Find a mentoring couple in your life that's walking with you. Also want to encourage you to ask questions. On that Slido app, ask questions. Again, they're anonymous, and we're going to start next week's session answering those questions. And next week's session is going to be our last session, and we're going to do some fun things together. And so please, I want to encourage you. These are the most important needs. And so if you have a question, ask it. And what's great about Slido is you can vote for other people's questions. You can vote them up in the area of priority. And so we can walk through a couple of them next week. For this week, here's the resources. Okay, first, each week we have a theme. Last week the theme was being generous. This week the theme is serving. The week is service. It's serving your husband or your wife in these top 1 areas, okay? Serving them. And now there's 5 resources that I'm going to say out loud, and that's going to show up in the chat next to it that you can click over, and it'll take you to Amazon, and you can order those books. Order them all at once, put them on the shelf, so when you finish one, the other one's right there for you, okay? The first one is Intended for Pleasure by Ed and Gay Wheat. That's number 1. Number 2 is The Language of Sex by Smalley and Cunningham. Okay. 3 is Sheet Music by Kevin Lehman. 4 is Every Heart Restored by Stephen Artenberg and Fred Stoker. There's actually 4 resources, not 5. That last one, Every Heart Restored, is really important because it deals with brokenness in our lives that we bring into marriage and how it affects our sexual fulfillment in marriage. It's good for husbands and it's good for wives. There's also 2 other books called Every Man's Battle and Every Woman's Battle that you could do as a follow-up. Then there's also 2 other books, I know, for men only and for women only is also another great resource to consider. And so the number one need, in summary, for a husband is sexual fulfillment, for a wife is affection. Encourage you to, even now as we're drawing to a close, to not just stop this and not converse on this. Yeah. This is going to take focused attention. This is going to take effort. And so we're going to exhort you and encourage you to dig in. Don't think this is just going to happen. It takes effort. Yeah. And no matter if you're 50 years married right now, hey, what a great time to take even more ground in your marriage. And so we bless you in the name of Jesus. We're really thankful to be with you on these Monday nights. And we just can't wait to bring the finality to the number 4th, Marriage Infusion number 4 next week. So ask those questions, and we look forward to seeing you then.